Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I'm Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And last time we talked about fighting at work. And in that, we talked about the idea of triangulation. And we thought, you know what? Let's do a whole show on that. So episode 35, the Triangulation Show.
35.
35. We made a lot. 35.
Yeah.
So let me explain the concept of triangulation. And for those of you that are listening, I have a triangle. Thank you to my granddaughter for providing the art supplies. Imagine a triangle. At the top of the triangle is Anne. Anne is the boss. At the bottom of the triangle, on one side is Joe, and on one side is Bob. Let's say Joe and Bob have a conflict with one another, right? Let's say Joe and Bob are peers. They get along well. They're perfectly capable of dealing with whatever the conflict is between them. But Anne decides, for reasons, to jump into the conflict, to insert herself into it, making showing the triangle, making the triangle. So basically, triangulation is a third party inserting themselves or being drawn into conflict that could and should be handled by two people.
Yeah. Busybodyitis, I think.
Well, and there's a couple of different reasons, right? In that example, we have a manager who is being a busybody, who is inserting herself into something that isn't her business. However, you often see the third party being unwilling. Like a example is a couple who is going through a divorce after a long marriage, who draws in one of their adult children unwillingly, and each parent complains to the kid about the other parent. That's an unwilling triangulation, right? That adult child clearly does not want to hear about mom and dad's divorce, but is being unwillingly brought into it. So that's what we want to talk today about, is the kind of complexities of the triangulation relationship, the justifications that as leaders and workers we can sometimes get into to excuse our unskillful behavior. And then, as always, we'll try to talk about some solutions and things that you can try if this is a problem for you or your workplace.
I kind of like how right from the outset you ascribe the motives that you're ascribing or seem to be ascribing are positive, because there are a lot of bosses I've had who have actually enjoyed triangulation and set about creating situations or exploiting opportunities to have that flower and flourish.
Do you have any examples, any specifics?
It is one that I've mentioned before, and I think of it just now because she was just here minutes ago, where I had a fairly comfortable work relationship with a coworker who had been at the Wall Street Journal, so qualitatively up to my standards of journalistic standards. And I felt like we had a great working relationship. She was on record as being my manager, but we're more, friendly. And our boss, who was also from the Wall Street Journal, called us in to a meeting and said, she says you intimidate her, and tried to set us up at loggerheads against each other in order to forestall the possibility, I guess people do this, of a united front against him. But I laughed it off because, he had just been there. I'd been in Hellco for 8 years at that point. So I was not going to be duped into somebody's trio. I was not going to do this.
Well, and one of the challenges with triangulation is just recognizing what it is. And so that's a great example, right? He was, who knows? In his mind, he might have thought he was managing effectively. Oh, no, there's a conflict, right? And I think the only time that bringing in a third party or being the third party is if there is an instance of abuse, right? So if somebody that reports to me comes and says, this person is sexually harassing me, they're being, whatever their lack of skill is, if it makes me, the employee, feel unsafe, then it is incumbent upon me to insert myself. You can't say to, two people when one of them is sexually harassing the other one, you two go work it out, right? So there are circumstances, and who knows, maybe the boss felt like he was trying to, insert himself into something that could have been damaging or destructive. But I think the idea is whenever there's that third party dynamic, you want to get curious about why it's happening. Because what I've seen, and I've mentioned this before, a lot of people will have bad behavior and call it management.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do unskillful triangulation and call it management. They'll do gossip or character assassination and call it management. And I think we need to be careful with each other as managers and in a culture. Because, right, if I'm a manager and I am managing people and they see me gossiping about somebody and pretending that it's management, triangulating repeatedly, they're going to think that that's kind of what we do. So I want to look at a couple of ways in which this can happen. So one of them, which I think is sort of subtle, is something that I call my sideism, right? Which is you are trying to get other people in a group to agree with you as if what is happening is not a conflict between you and another person, but actually a pitched battle. And you are
everybody says.
And to use this example, I think it's easiest to talk about a family system because you see this a lot in family systems where there are a number of siblings, right? So a sister and a brother have an argument, and the sister, instead of going to her brother and saying, "Hey, what is happening? I'm super angry with you," goes to her other sisters and says, "He did that." And the problem is that in families, there are emotional hooks. Right. So an older sister who should know better doesn't say, "Okay, you need to go talk to him directly." She says, "You know what? I remember when he did something like that to me." And the idea is that the older sister may think she has a good motive. She may think that she is emotionally supporting her younger sister. She may feel like she's giving her younger sister a place to process, that she's holding space for her emotions. Right. But that's not what the younger sister is looking for. She just wants to get people on her side. Right. She just wants to create that feud dynamic so that she can have, and then she can turn it back on the brother. We all think that. We all agree that. Right. Which is
everybody says.
Yes, everybody says. And so I think that can also happen at work, particularly dysfunctional or fear-based work environments where people do feel like they need to have political alliances and that there is that kind of, I need more people on my side. Do you think that's true?
Yes. And I have two instances, one a comical aside and one an actual real instance. A comical aside is that a friend of mine lived in the same neighborhood with one of the Hatfields, from the Hatfield and McCoys, the actual family. And it should surprise no one. She sold, she bought a car from him. At one point, she sort of realized that he neglected to take out the car stereo system that he kind of said that he wanted, but he didn't, but he sold it and he got the cash. 3 days later, her car is stolen, found 3 blocks away, and the only thing missing is the stereo system. So it's nice to see that the Hatfields and the McCoys, whatever got them in that problem generationally, has continued past the year 2000. So there is that. The other one is in a small company, a company of 16 people, a manager was hired from a very large company, the large company being Yahoo at this point. And this person came in, and the intent was, you could just see it. It was like the emperor's new clothes to do the political maneuvering that was probably de rigueur in the big company at Yahoo. Absolutely did not work on a team of 16 people. So it was like going from a family of 16 people and then trying to do that when you just have you and your sibling. I mean, it was a very weird. And what was even stranger about it was that it was a cult to her. What she was not aware of the fact that we could see what she was doing. And so it made it largely ineffective, just irksome. But I found it to be very strange how something that would have worked very easily where she had been on Friday absolutely did not work on Monday at the new place where she was. And she didn't realize it in time enough to make it work for her. She just ended up quitting the job.
Right.
So.
Well, and what I think is interesting is there are certain types of bad behavior that I have seen in my work life or even in executive coaching where everybody acknowledges, including the perpetrator, this is bad behavior, right? Like I have worked with and for multiple executive creative directors who were very talented white guys who had problems that everybody acknowledged. They didn't address, but like drug addiction, can't get through the day without getting high, violence, like yelling, disrespectful to women, whatever. Like, and so there's a set of problems that can happen in the corporate world that are obvious and they are identified as problems. I think that the triangulation and the propensity to triangulate is a problem that often masquerades as an asset, which is why I think it's so difficult. So the people that I see that are really drawn to this triangulation have a kind of set of characteristics that I think is pretty consistent. And they also have a narrative of themselves as leaders that diverges from reality.
Okay. I want to ask you one question. Do you think that their failures in their professional failures, in that I don't think this is part of being a good manager or being part of a good managerial class, do you think their professional failings are also at play in their personal lives?
Generally, I think yes. I mean, and I can't always know that, like particularly if I'm in an executive coaching or consulting position, I can't say to somebody, which one of your parents was the alcoholic?
Yeah, right.
I can have my ideas. I can think about stuff. So I don't necessarily know because I don't talk about what's going on personally. But generally what I see is that the people who have these behaviors or tendencies or patterns or narratives in their professional life also have it in their personal life. So go ahead.
I just wondered if it was possible to professionally be out of step, but personally, the people at home wouldn't recognize who you were talking about. So their bifurcation was kind of complete. It was just a curiosity.
I think it would depend on what the family culture is. So for example, sometimes there are people who are very invested in everyone around them being happy. And they may come from a family system where they grew up, the culture that has a lot of big emotions. My family, the Italians, have a lot of big emotions, right? So for us to be yelling at each other at the dinner table is like normal. And so what might work in that situation where there's a lot of yelling, people talk over each other, there's high emotions, big fights, we don't care about conflict, that could be successful in your home environment and be really damaging if you were in a work culture with a bunch of, like engineers in Seattle who are conflict averse and don't know from hand waving and are going to be very, going to be very uncomfortable. And so I do think it's a culture, right? Every workplace is a system. Every family is a system. What works in one system doesn't necessarily work in the others, and it can impact it. But I think the challenge is that, so I talk often about that there are different types of people. One type focuses on tasks. I'm just here to get the work done. The other type focuses on relationships. I want everyone to like me and I want everyone to like each other. It's really important to me that we are on the best workplaces in, the Pacific Northwest. And those are both valid. You need task people who can just get the job done, but don't care whether everyone likes them. You also need relationship people to build relationships with vendors, with one another. You need both of them. The challenge is those two people can clash. So for example, I am a task person. If something needs to get done, I will say, you three need to go get this done. And if it's not getting done, I'll be like, what's the problem? I will try to be kind. I will try to be professional. But if those three people don't like me or they have bad energy, that is a consequence of the choices of their actions, right? That's what they chose to do. A lot of people who are much more relationship based will tend to come in and do the triangulation, right? So if, two people are arguing or if there's some sort of tension, the relationship-oriented manager might be more inclined to come in and insert themselves into the situation, right? It also depends on how what is the narrative you tell yourself about what you are like as a manager? There are people who love to fix stuff, right? And they want to come in and they want to fix stuff. And they can really risk over functioning for the people that work for them. right?
Yeah.
There's a certain arrogance to saying these two managers who are grown people with business experience can't solve their challenge. So I need to come riding into the rescue. Right? But a lot of people think that's what being a boss is. That's what being a fixer is. That's what being a manager is. As opposed to recognizing, how about if I treat these two people like experienced adults who have 10 years of work experience and can probably figure out the interdepartmental challenge? And if they can't, then they can come and ask me.
Yeah, okay. but I look at it like the famous story, the Tar Baby story, because from a managerial perspective, once you say what you just said, which is here grown, they got you, right? You've expressed an opinion. You're the boss. You're Anna. You've expressed an opinion, but you now have addressed whatever imbroglio that they're now having, and you're involved, right? Where my desire as a boss has always been, well, please, could you handle it? Because I'm a task lunatic. And I keep thinking, every month the magazine's got to come out, or whatever publishing schedule we have. It has to adhere to these. We have to meet these deadlines. And I'm sorry that, you're cranky but you got to get over that. And I would think that even spending a moment in my history talking about this other stuff would just drive me to distraction. So.
Well, if the other stuff that you're talking about is getting into the nuances of their emotional conflict or trying to help them sort that out, totally get it. I do think there is value in naming it. How many meetings have we all been in where there's some conflict that no one is mentioning, and it's the elephant in the room, and there's tension and the people are simmering and there's, sniping at each other. It can be helpful to say, it's, a lot of times I like to use really neutral language. I'm sensing some energy between the two of you. Maybe you two could figure that out. I'm naming. There's no judgment. There's energy. Maybe someone had a lack of skill. The idea of naming stuff, I think, can be a more positive way to spur people on without necessarily taking ownership of it. But then again, I am very comfortable with conflict, right? So naming something is my style, and I think it can be effective. One of the challenges is that another reason people will get into triangulation is that they're very conflict averse, right? So in that case, I don't want to directly address the person that I'm frustrated with, right? Like if I'm, who are we talking about? If I'm Bob and I'm mad at Joe, but I am a really conflict averse person, I'm not going to go to Joe and say, can I give you some feedback? This, whatever. I'm not going to address it directly.
Right.
And I should. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Anna. I'm going to go to the boss and I'm going to complain about Joe. And that is, again, sometimes people think of that as management, right? Like I'm going to talk to my boss and I'm going to, get her input and ask, get her advice, have her tell me what I should do about Joe or reframe the narrative. When really the reality is you just don't have the capacity to directly address to the person that's impacting you what's happening.
Right. Yeah.
And again, name it. If you're so conflict averse that you can't directly say something to somebody and you have to go to your boss to get her to do your dirty work, own it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, that's something I never factor in, that it might be the lesser of two roads, because your boss might 50-50 throw some support behind you, and then you can avoid what is clearly bound to be a very direct conflict with Joe or Bob or whoever the case may be. So but as a boss, everybody should know that's the last thing they want to spend their time doing. Honest to God, unless
there are some bosses, like I have seen people in leadership who should know better, who really enjoy. They love gossip.
Yeah,
right? And gossip is a way to get information. People feel, we gossip because we're social animals. We like knowing each other's business, right? And there's a whole industry that's built on talking about the gossip about famous people, right? We do like that, and that's fun. It's just understanding and mediating it, right? Like there are people who really like wine. you don't necessarily want to be drinking wine all day at the office. You may love gossip, but keep it in its appropriate place. And again, there are people who think that it is management, right? And it's often women where they'll complain like, oh, people just come and they tell me all their problems, and they want to, they want to tell me about their marriage problems and every issue that comes up. And if they're complaining about that, it's almost like that humble brag. Like, I'm so important to everybody. I just don't, this place can't function without me.
And it's also a prelude to them sharing whatever thing is they shouldn't be sharing. Right.
Exactly.
Right. So
exactly. Yeah. And so I think that the idea is, and then the last one is that there are people who are comfortable with a really high emotional, they like really high emotional energy, right? Mm-hmm. It feels genuine to them. It feels like they're really engaging, and I won't go into the kind of assessments and systems and type, but there are just some people that like a lot of energy. We might call them people who love drama, who stir stuff up.
Drama queens.
They like that. Yeah. And
I used to work for one who's on trial this week. So.
And that is a person who liked a really high level of emotional energy.
Right.
Right. And would tend to, those people will make everything into drama, make everything to a fight. Talk about my sideism. You're either with me or against me. You're either my friend and we've linked arms to do this wonderful thing, or you're arrayed on the side of evil. And those escalations often are a big, big warning sign. Right? And so I guess that just to get to some of the practical things, if any of these things resonate for you, just do some examination, right? And maybe talk to somebody. If you're a leader and you are listening to this and one or two of the things we've talked about today kind of makes you sick to your stomach, get curious about it, right? Like maybe just, if you have an executive coach or a trusted confidant at work, maybe ask, do you think I do triangulation? Right? Not somebody who works for you, but somebody who's a peer or above, or, in HR. Do I do this? Have you seen this? Right? Get some feedback. But then also be mindful, like just out of curiosity, how often do you talk about a person who isn't in the room with another person?
All right. Right.
If it's all day, every day, then you could get curious about that. Because what I found in this idea of like, is it gossip or is it management? If I'm talking about a third person, right, a third party to another person, I should be very specific and there should be an end result. I noticed that, Jane was unable to get her work done on time again. I'm, how can we address this? Here's the problem as I perceive it. Is there anything that I'm missing? Here's what's happening. And I think where this gets challenging is if you have a person who is really manipulative, right? So if you have a dysfunctional workplace and people are running around getting activated and activating each other, and there's like just lots of stormy emotional weather, people can play on that, right? So let's imagine a scenario where you have a leader who's really invested in a relationship, who really thinks of himself as like, I'm the, problem solver person.
Now, now, does that mean that is this a clear-cut division between you can have a task person and a relationship person, but there's no admixture of the two for the purpose of this discussion, right?
No, clearly you can have an admixture of the two.
Okay.
I think what I'm trying to point out for illustration purposes is that often relationship people will foment, participate in, or be more comfortable with a really high level of activation and emotional energy, right? I mean, I've worked in a lot of advertising agencies, creatives in particular. They can have those big energy workplaces. Think about, the TV show The Bear, about a restaurant and chefs, right? Those are, and some people love those environments. The theater. There are a lot of places that you think of as being stereotypically high energy, right? And people love that. They thrive there. Great. Then there are places that are lower energy, right? Doesn't mean they're not task focused. The show still goes on. People get do their, hit their lines and act and whatever, but there's a certain amount of drama. those drama workplaces are more prone, in my experience, to that triangulation, because people they're sort of, it's like they're primed for that activation, right? So let's imagine that somebody comes to this boss, call him Bill, who wants to be the, like, I help everybody loves me, we all get along well, and says, you know what? I've tried for my last 2 one-on-ones with Emily. She has canceled at the last minute. She hasn't rescheduled. And I really recognize this as a part of a pattern of her just not supporting me. I'm not getting the mentorship that I need. I'm not getting the one-on-one connection that I need. And it's questioning whether or not I want to stay at this company. Mm-hmm. All sorts of flares of like, I'm escalating this and I'm making it about drama. Right. And, people do that, right?
Yeah.
No. So Bill could say, oh my gosh, I'm going to talk to her right away. I'm going to, I can mentor you. I'm the CEO, but I have an open door policy. Mentorship and development of our staff is very important. It's one of our critical values. And he could justify barreling on in. Instead of being more skillful and maybe getting curious, have you talked to Emily?
Right.
Do you know what's going on for her? Because clearly, if Emily just had a miscarriage, there's a reason why she's canceling her meetings. There's a reason she might not want to say why she's canceling her meetings. Yeah. This idea of assuming best intention, getting curious, wondering, because of course that completely changes the narrative. And again, I'm using a fairly dramatic story, but I think the idea is to be aware of, like, what's the emotional weather at your workplace?
Right. It's funny. I took over, I was part of a team that started a publication with folks from Condé Nast. And it was a men's fashion magazine. So it had one foot in the fashion world and 1 foot at Condé Nast, which was largely like 2 feet in the same place. And the group dynamic was horrible in terms of that bottom part of the triangle where everybody was in everybody's business. There was, eye rolling in meetings, teeth sucking, people stalking out of the meetings. And the Condé Nast people left. And I inherited the publication as it was. And I come from, despite minor forays into modeling, come from largely a journalistic background, and it was completely unacceptable to me. So I said, well, as a boss, I need to change this because it's driving me to distraction. And what I did is this is where back to the personal versus professional. What I did is to employ exactly the same methodology I did with my kids. Like, you guys solve your own problems, or I have to come in and make everything worse for everybody. So I said, there'll be no more teeth sucking, eye rolling, stalking out of meetings. If you do this, if you stalk out of the meeting for any other reason than extreme diarrhea or incontinence, do not expect to be invited back to the next meeting. And beyond that, I don't believe you can do your job effectively. So just keep on going. Step out, just keep on, walk out, and just keep on going. And I didn't think it would work, but I was shocked to discover it actually worked. The one piece of gossip I heard after that was Eugene is a homophobe. I asked, well, Tim, how'd you come to that conclusion? Well, he told me if I was late again. Well, Tim, how late have you time? Well, I've been late 8 times, but that's it. The VP called me and I said, no, Tim, you can look at the record. And she was like, okay, that's it. Attempt to up-level the triangulation did not succeed. And the guy started coming to work on time. It's LA, but you still got to show that you can't be 2 hours late every day. You can't. So,
well, what's skillful is that you named the behavior that was not acceptable to you. Yeah. You were clear about what the consequences were. Right? Not be invited to meetings, and then you're not going to have the job. And you did a really kind of a hard reset, like, we're going to shift. And you were able to do that as a leader. And that's a great way to kind of draw to a conclusion that if you are in leadership and you recognize a propensity in yourself to triangulate, or a culture that has where the temperature keeps rising in terms of drama, in terms of energy, in terms of conflict, you can pretty quickly shift that dynamic, whether it's by naming it, changing your own behavior, being clear about what it is that you want instead. What I call that is a word picture. Here's the behavior that I'm seeing, and you get super specific. Here is the behavior that I want to see, and you get super specific, right? This is what you will and will not do in meetings. And then here are the consequences. And that can be really effective in doing that kind of hard reset of a culture. Okay. I think that's all we've got.
Hold on.
What?
I actually have a fire me.
Oh, tell me to fire me. Sorry. We'll just keep going. Fire me. Tell me.
Because it ties in. A friend of mine they have 360-degree reviews, right? And he's on the fence about whether or not he tells the truth or he, politicizes this thing because he's unhappy with his manager for very, very good reasons. He works on hardware. And his boss is not an especially effective manager, but I'm hearing one side of it, so what do I know? But as a result of at least 10 days of articles in Politico, in Axios, and different publications, he's found out that the company's focus has completely moved off of what it is he's doing, right? It's like it is an attempt to, and I think I could talk about the company. We're talking about Google again, and the focus is increasingly on AI and the search engine's AI capabilities, and to keep buoy the stock price, they've kind of pivoted toward how successful they've been, how they're ahead of Microsoft and well ahead of Apple with their interest in AI, and it just like the sunlight of acknowledgement before in the hardware division, which deals with phones, has just shifted. So this $1 billion portion of the company business is now completely ignored, and he's reading article after article after article. And finally, the deadline was today, and he said, "I wrote the review," and I go, "Did you tell the truth or did you soft sell it?" He goes, "I told the truth. I didn't put my name. I didn't write a single word to it." Because they have it's multiple choice. So you could do it multiple choice. I just left it with the picks and the numbers occasionally so that the boss wouldn't be able to figure out it was me. But I told the truth because while it's clear that the entire company's focus is moved on to AI for whatever stock price, public markets, they're still spending billions of dollars on this thing that fundamentally his boss hasn't seen a way to fix it so that it works in actual fact. So he's like doing an Achilles thing. I could fix it. I've tried to fix it. You've ignored my attempts to fix it. It's $1 billion portion of the business. You're not going to be saved by them switching to AI. So why don't I tell the truth? So I thought this is kind of a mix of a sub rose and a fire me, because the fact that I think Sundar at Google has chosen to make this shift and not informed anybody, really.
That's the key part that I was thinking about. I'm presuming that your friend is fairly senior in the hierarchy.
Yes.
The idea that there's been no internal communications and yet multiple articles is problematic.
Yeah. I mean, imagine you're finding out what's going on in your house from the newspaper. It is disconcerting. So that is, again, I'm going to give a raspberry to the communication skills of upper management here at Google. But again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you spend months and months telling people that you're shifting to AI, but I don't think so because I read the trades too. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. On that note, we will close this episode and ask that you send us ideas for other episodes, or as Eugene mentioned, we have an advice podcast, a little short one called Sub Rosa, WTF@badbossbrief.com. And I am being told to ask, please talk about this podcast, share it with your friends. If you're on Substack, subscribe. It is free.
Give us a thumbs up, too.
There you go. And oh, look, it just came up a thumbs up. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's number 3, on Instagram, Reach out with your questions, concerns, worst case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief and every single week for our Sub Rosa shorts, so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.